What's going on, guys? Welcome to Making Multifamily Money. So this is the most private session that we've had in a while here. So we're kind of talking offline a little bit, and we're just sharing about our real estate portfolios, before I hit record here. Um, but overall, sorry, please remind me of your name again. Oh, Chang. Yeah, he was just talking about his experience with single family homes. You're more advanced, I guess, real estate investor. I'd consider it. If you own that many single families in multiple states like me. But I guess, do you kind of have any questions in regards to anything multifamily? I also own a mobile home park. I'm not sure if you know my full story, but I own 90 units, two apartment complexes in Oklahoma City, a mobile home park in Selma, Alabama. So I own 55 acres of land over there. Um, but any kind of questions that you had about anything multifamily? Yeah, yeah. So basically, taking a step back, I basically, as I mentioned offline, I started off in single family homes in California. So as you know, own a bunch of real estate in California as well. It's expensive, right? Like average home back when I bought in 2017 was about $1 million. It's probably closer to 1.5 to 2 at this point in the Bay Area. So, it's hard to cash flow, especially like in the major markets like San Jose, San Francisco, all that area. So I just said, my goal was to buy one a year for 10 years. So to buy one single family a year for 10 years, to have 10 single family homes, but quickly realized it's not scalable. So I just started looking into other markets, and that's what led me to Oklahoma City. And people ask me why Oklahoma City. It's not the most appealing market, but I just had a really good property manager there. So that was my pure reason as to choosing why. Because if you have a good property manager, that's how you scale, right? That's how you scale. And um, what kind of blew my mind was, so my I own 46 units in Oklahoma. I own 26 units in Oklahoma City specifically, and I own 20 units in Enid, Oklahoma. So that's maybe about an hour and a half north of Oklahoma. So it's a little bit smaller of a town. It borders, I think, Kansas, if my geography is correct. But basically, how I got both these deals was I sent a bunch of mailers out. So that's what basically that's a service I offer. So basically, full disclosure, I own a multifamily course where you teach, but on top of that, I have a direct mailing service that I do for busy professionals because people, it's easy to do mailers, but for some reason, a lot of people just don't do it consistently. And that's how you get the deals off market. But basically, I sent out 300 letters a month for 6 months, and I basically got these two apartment complexes off market under market value. So the first one was right during COVID, actually, the peak of the real estate in, I think, May of 2021. So it was pretty hot, right? That's when I sent letters out. This owner called me for a 26 unit. He's a lawyer. He just said, "Hey, got your letter. Like, just make me an offer." So, of course, with apartments, you want to ask for a T12, which is the profit and loss statement for the past 12 months, and then a recent rent roll. So you just can gauge, how much income this is making, and when you want financing, that's what your lender's going to ask for, right? They're going to ask for a T12, and then a rent roll, and then they might ask you like, what rents do you think it can be raised up to? So, um, I'm not sure if you guys know, but basically, well, single family homes, the value is based on the sales comps. So if your neighbor's house sells for 500,000, then most likely your house will sell for 500,000. But in apartment complexes, the value is based on the net operating income divided by the market cap rate, right? So if you have two apartment complexes right next to each other, if one has an NOI of let's say 100,000 and one has an NOI of 200,000 and they're right next to each other, the one that has an NOI of 200,000 is worth double because it's value based on income. So, that really kind of blew my mind, first of all, because you can force appreciation, right? If you buy right, you raise the rents, you can force the value to go up. So that was one pivot change. And the second pivot change for me is, when you buy single family homes, they look at your DTI, debt to income ratio, right? Like that's what they ask for. They ask for all your whatever mortgage statements, your rent lease agreements, and all that. But with multifamily, they don't really care about my DTI personally. I mean, they do look at it. It's nice if you have a job, but they're more focused on the debt service coverage ratio, and that has to be greater than 1.25. And if you have that, then basically they'll finance the deal, right? Um, so for me, I offered basically, I think I offered $520,000 for my 26 unit. So what is that, like almost like 20K per unit, roughly? So that's really cheap, right? 20K per unit, and each unit was renting for about maybe 350. So if you know single family homes, the 1% rule, right? So if each unit is 20K to cash flow, you do the 1% rule, so it's about $200 in rents, and you should be cash flowing. So I was already at 350, right? So I knew I was going to cash flow pretty well, but also the rents were under by about half. So the owner hasn't raised the rents in 5 years. So the market rent is around 700, but I have to do some renovations to get there. So, um, so basically, I knew that if I can double my rents, what does that mean, right? I can double the value of the apartment complex with some renovations. So basically, I got those things, and then I got my lender. So I used Bank of the West to finance this deal for me, and I found Bank of the West. I paid a mortgage broker, and they found me Bank of the West. So the mortgage broker, you pay them a fee or whatever, and then they'll go find the best lender for you. Um, I was new at the time, so I didn't really have as many connections in lending. But basically, I paid this broker. He brought me this Bank of the West, and basically, I was quoted 25% down, about 4.25% interest, fixed for 10 years, and it's a 30-year amortized loan. So, basically from there, you can kind of calculate your debt service coverage ratio. I think 1.5 or something. It was really great. And then you can calculate your cash and cash return, right? So I had all that numbers, and so they liked the deal. So of course they said, okay, we'll finance. They gave me approval to basically finance my apartment complex. So um, something that I kind of glossed over was, so after I got that financing approved, I did a full property inspection. So just like with single family homes, it costs around $500 to inspect a single family home. To inspect the 26 unit apartment complex, I think it costed me around $7,000 to inspect all 26 units. So it's a lot more expensive compared to single family homes. But because of that inspection, I was able to basically I think I got $70,000 in seller repair credit by making an amendment to the contract. So what does that do? That lowers your down payment, right? So at $500,000, 25%, that's 125,000. I think my down payment was actually about 140. But I got $70,000 in seller repair credit. So what does that do? That cut my down payment in half. So I only had to come out of pocket $70,000 for this apartment complex, which is about 12, 13% down. So that's pretty good, right? That's pretty leveraged. And from there, pretty much after I got all the documents, they sent an appraisal out. My 26 unit appraised at $750,000 day one. So, right out the gate, I made about almost $250,000 equity day one into the deal, right? Because I went off market, I sent mailers out, and I basically just offered him tax assessed price, and he just took my offer because he didn't want to pay a mortgage broker to work with. He just wanted to work direct with me. So out the gate, I basically bought a 26 unit that I made $250,000 equity day one. I got $70,000 of down payment reduction, right? So if you kind of add that up, that's almost about 300,000. And then on top of that, I have potential to double my rents, so I can double the value of the apartment, right? So if they appraise at 750 and the rents are around 350 average, but after I put in about maybe eight to $10,000 per unit of renovation, and I can double the rents from 350 to 700, I just doubled the value of my apartment complex, and I put in about maybe, let's say, close to $300,000. So I bought it for half a million. I put in 300,000, right? So I'm all in for 800,000, but it'll be worth 1.5 million when I'm done with it, right? So basically, I forced a bunch of appreciation by buying right, doing renovations, and then raising the rents, right? So I basically make money multiple ways. So you make money from instant equity day one, and then from the forced appreciation. So that's basically how I did that. So that was about a year and a half ago. So fast forward to today. Um, Honestly, it took my contractor a year to start renovating my 26 unit because it was so backed up back then. But since then, I've renovated probably about 10 units to this day. So starting in the past 6 months, we renovated about 10 units. And I did hit my projections, right? It took me about maybe $10,000 per unit, a little more expensive because of labor and supply costs. But then I was able to rent out um, one bedroom for 650 and a two bedroom for 750. So average out to be 700 each. So basically, that's my value add strategy that I'm doing. And then as I kind of learned, at first I thought I was gonna renovate all units, but you kind of want to have a mix of like premium units and then more affordable regular units where they don't are not upgraded. So you can kind of hit a wider tenant base, right? So people can have a premium option that's 700, and you can have the cheaper option at like 500. So I'm not renovating all the units right now. I'm probably gonna do about half, and then basically, so I'm almost there. Right, I did about maybe 10 units. Maybe got a couple more in there that I'll renovate as people turn, and then present this to my lender, and then do a cash out refi. Interest rates are terrible now, but it's okay. I can pull out my money, and then pull out my down payment, pull out my renovation costs, and go buy another one. And then whatever apartments, you always cash out refi every about 7 to 10 years, anyways. So I'm not too worried if the rates drop down in like 5 years. I'll just cash out refi again, and then lower my rate and pull out some cash. So that's my first deal, and then my 20 unit, basically same thing. I sent my letters out to Oklahoma. This guy called me. He actually wrote a postcard back to me. That's how old fashioned they are. And then he just said, "Give me a tax assessed price." I just said, "All right, that's $400,000 for a 20 unit. Really cheap, 20K per unit again. Rents are around maybe 350, but this market, it's not as nice as Oklahoma. So maybe your top rent might be 500. So kind of same concept, right? So basically buy it. I'm renovating it. And then, so I bought for about 350, put in 100,000 in renovation. And I think it's gonna be worth maybe about 800,000 when I'm done with it. So like you do the BRRRR strategy. But for this deal, I financed with a hard money loan. And why I had to do a hard money loan was because I think when I bought the property, like too many units are vacant. I think about 8 units were vacant. So it's only 12 out of 20. So they typically you need around maybe like 90% if you want a lender to give you a traditional loan. So I basically took it over of a hard money loan, but because it was just not vacant and I had to do some renovation, I just did a hard money loan. So for the numbers, it's 25% down, 9% interest only, which I thought was high. But if you look at interest rates today, it's like what, 7 to 8. I mean, my hard money loan looks like a normal loan now. But what's nice about the hard money loan is that they give me money for the renovation as well. So it's a loan to cost value. So I basically put 25% down, and then I got $100,000 to apply towards renovation. So I put in about $100,000 of renovation to this day. I think I renovated, I think 5 units. One unit was completely burned out, so that cost me like half my budget, to be honest. And then I used the rest of the 50,000 to renovate, other units. And then, right now, I basically have a lot of vacant units. Unfortunately, like when I took over the property, 8 were it was rate only 12 occupied, and I think out of the 12, I'm down to like maybe 7 or 8 because we had this like bed bug outbreak, and a lot of tenants were not good tenants anyways, so they just all kind of left. So, but now I'm basically stuck trying to rent out, about 13 units during the holidays, and it's really hard to get good tenants during the holidays because people don't want to move during this time. So, um, so yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Does that kind of answer your question there? I kind of went all over the place. Um, Ching, did that answer your question? Yeah, no, like that's what I wondered too, because like what I kind of teach in my course is like a three offer method. So number one is tax assessed price. That's always the cheapest. Number two is net operating income divided by the market cap rate. So once the income and loss for the past year, and the cap rate is based on market. So Oklahoma is like a seven cap. So you divide it by 0.07. And then the last one is the cost per unit. So I know the average cost per unit in Oklahoma is about $50,000 per unit. That's like turnkey renovated, right? I think it might have increased recently to 55 K per unit. So you take those three offers and then basically um, take the lowest of the three, and usually the lowest is the tax assessed price, which is like public information. So it's because like people like asked me like how was that possible? And like, like none of them felt like they got ripped off. To be honest, like none of the owners, and I think I was just solving a pain point for them. That's the way I felt like I was doing it. And like, like the first guy, the 26 unit, when I offered him because he's a lawyer, I thought he was gonna counter me because he's a lawyer. That's what lawyers do, right? They counter. But I literally gave a lowball offer, but I was probably willing to go up to like close to 800,000, based off of the numbers and the cash flow. But you want to do like a give and take, right? You kind of plant, and then he might go to like, hey, give me 900. I'm like, well, I'll give you 700. Just negotiations. But he just took my offer out the gate, and I was like surprised. And I think his pain points was that he was a full-time lawyer. He was managing 26 units himself, so he did his own pest control. He did his own maintenance. He did his own leases. He used one unit as his office to work there sometimes. So he was like your typical, he, older gentleman in his upper 60s that was doing everything himself, and he's a lawyer. Lawyers work a lot, right? They work a lot of hours. So I think he was just tired, and like for him, like the property is owned free and clear. So like to him, it's like this is his $500,000 nest egg. And despite that, he gave me seller repair credit of $70,000. If he said no to my seller repair credit, I still would have bought the deal, right? But then because I just built that trust with him and just said, hey, like here are all the quotes like that I got. Like I'm not making this up. Like this is what needs to be repaired based on the inspection report. These are all my quotes. Here, give me whatever. I asked for $120,000 of seller repair credit or something like that, and he just said, property is as is, but if you tease it down to more critical stuff, I'll consider it. So I just said, all right, let me talk to my property manager. And then I just said, all right, well, I need a new roof, which is $30,000 because that roof is done. And insurance won't give me, insurance if I don't have a roof, right? Or at least have plans to replace the roof. If there's no insurance, the lender doesn't want to give me money. And that delays him from his $500,000 retirement, right? So it's just really find the motivation. And then for the 20 unit, I mean, this guy, he was unfortunately a slumlord, right? Like he didn't fix anything. Like he had a burned out unit that was burned out for like 5 years, and he didn't want to fix it up because it cost a lot of money. It cost me like $40,000 to fix up that unit, just one unit, $40,000, right? When it typically takes around 8,000 to 10,000 to turn one unit, real nice. But because the new electrical, everything was brand new, has to be brought to code, was a lot of money. And, if I were to look back, I should have just left it burn down myself. But I already renovated it, and it looks real nice. But, so basically it's really the people that the letters attract. I'll tell you what they attract. Number one, they probably do it themselves. to be honest. They do everything themselves, property management, maintenance, everything. So because of that, what does that tell you? They're cheap, right? They're cheap. Let's be honest here. They're too cheap to pay someone to do it because they want to do it themselves and pocket that money, which is fine, right? There's nothing against that model. But if they're too cheap to do all that, they're too cheap to pay a broker, right? Because brokers, you pay them, 3 to 6%, of the purchase price. In his case, if he used a broker, ironically, he probably would have gotten more for the property versus like what I ended up paying. But sometimes people, like, you cannot put yourself in the seller's shoes. Like, if it was me, yeah, I'd give it to a broker to get the high price, right? But maybe the guy, because he owned this apartment for like 30 years, it's like his baby essentially, right? And he maybe wants to see the next owner who's going to buy his property and make sure that they take care of the property and the tenants that you inherit. So it's really like what their motivation is. Like, I don't think he was motivated by money because, like, his law firm probably makes a lot more, right? And the same for the 20 unit. Like, he just wanted to sell that thing, and take the money to invest in his business that he had. Like, he didn't care about the property at all. Everything was cheap. Unfortunately, like, I didn't catch it during due diligence, but like, a lot of the tenants were like bringing in homeless women to basically stay over for the night for service. I'm trying to keep this professional, but yeah, they would stay the night in exchange for a service, and so yeah, I had to weed out all those seedy tenants, and kind of change the apartment. So that's kind of what I did, and hopes that answers your question there. I saw someone, Stacy, raise your hand. What's your question, Stacy? Oh, okay. Did you have any questions about those two apartment complexes, or any questions in general? Oh, okay. So yeah, hope that answer your question there, Chang. Did I answer your question for some context? So, like, what I learned to do is, like, do not put your brain in the seller's mind, because how I think and how they think is completely different. That's what I learned. Just don't make any assumptions whatsoever when talking to a seller, and you just make an offer that makes sense for you. And if they say no, then it just wasn't meant to be. You walk away, right? You both walk away, or you can walk away and may follow up in, like, maybe 30, 60 days to see if they change their mind. Um, so yeah. Any other questions about my two apartment complex or mobile home park? Yeah, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, yeah, great question. So it was funny. Like, I never thought I would do a direct mail service, but because I just shared how I did my mailers, like, so many people approached me. I was like, all right, I'll just do your mailers for you. But basically, because I share everything what I do for my mailers, but like, people still get paralyzed by it because it seems intimidating. That's why I just said, okay, well, I'll do a service if it makes sense for me. So basically, what I did was I sent out 300 mailers a month for 6 months. So what I preach in my course and my mailing service is, if you want me to do it, I'm gonna do it for you for 6 months or 12 months. And why I make that range is because that's what you need. That's how long you need to do it to be successful, right? And sometimes it might take even longer than 12 months, depending on your market, right? So I'm investing in Oklahoma City. It's not as appealing of a market, not as competitive. So you have a higher response rate. So I sent 300 letters a month for 6 months, every month, right? And then it's how you structure your letters, which is key. So, I use an A2 sized envelope. So it's A2 size. So it's smaller. It's like an invitation card. Like, imagine someone gave you a thank you card, right? So if you Google A2 envelope, that's what I use. And then from there, so on the front, it's handwritten, right? So a handwritten name and address, right? So if it's Stephen Nguyen, 123 Main Street, California, whatever city, all it's handwritten. And when they flip the envelope over, you'll see my address sticker, right? So it'll be like Stephen Nguyen, this is my address on the back, right? And then from there, and on the front, sorry, it's a live stamp. So it's an actual live stamp, not pre-printed stamp, live stamp. You want to make it seem like it's coming from a friend, right? That's how I structure it. And then when you flip over the back, I actually don't seal the envelope. It's just tucked in. I tuck the flap into the back of the envelope. And why do I do that? Because it creates intrigue. Like, hey, who opened my mail? Right? Like, first of all, on the front, something's handwritten from a friend. I don't see a sender on there. That creates mystique. You turn it over, then you see me. It's a sender. You're like, oh, who's this guy? Right? I put I'm a pharmacist, so technically a doctor. So I put Dr. Stephen Nguyen on there. Like, who's this Dr. Stephen Nguyen? Like, why is he sending me a letter? And then they open the back. It's it's just not sealed. Like, so we don't lick it. We just tuck it, and then from there, they open it and they pull out this letter. And then on the letter, I have a template that I use, in my course and the students, and what I would do for my clients. And in the letter, it's pretty generic template. It just says, "Hey, owner's name," and I have like a personalized paragraph about myself. So I'll just say, "Hey, I'm Dr. Steve Nguyen. I'm a pharmacy director at a hospital. I've been working in this field for 10 years. I own, whatever, 5 single family homes. And I'm looking to buy some more real estate to provide for my, future kids and family, right? So something very basic and personalized. Like, you want to make yourself seem human, right? Because I essentially sent a letter out to a stranger, right? I'm some random guy from California sending you a letter to Oklahoma, right? And they probably can't even pronounce my last name in Oklahoma, right? Um, so basically, I did that, and then on the letter itself, so I have a handwritten signature. So I'll actually hand sign, Stephen Nguyen, and then I write a handwritten call to action. So it'll just be like, "Hey, Stacy, call me. Stephen, this is my number." Handwritten on the letter, right on top of what's the letter. So I typically preach, 3 handwritten call to actions, right? Or 3 call to actions on the letter, and 1 is handwritten to make it feel more personalized. And then from there, so for you don't know, I use PropStream for all my data, and then I outsource my letters to Yell Letters Complete, who is the company I partner with. So they help me do all that stuff, right? So I send them my data every month, and then they will prepare the letters for me and then mail it out. So I outsource it. So it takes a lot of time if I did it myself, right? It takes you about 8 hours to do 300 letters yourself. I did it one time. I was watching a bunch of football on Sunday and I was preparing letters for 8 hours. Watched 3 football games while doing all that. But basically, I did that, and then so typically I mail it on Monday, and then by Monday they receive it maybe like Wednesday, Thursday, and they usually respond on Fridays because they wind down for the week. So for some metrics in Oklahoma, I got about 3% response rate. So if I send out 300 letters, about 10 people will reach out to me in that first within like maybe 2 weeks of it being mailed out, right? So so that's the numbers, right? About 3%. But if you're like in Texas or California, it's gonna be 1%, or Florida, because it's a more competitive market. So if you send out 300 letters, you might get maybe 3 calls. But basically, my letters are very targeted towards mom and pop owners, because like people kind of say mail's outdated, and I thought so too. Like, I never send, like, I don't even own stamps, right? I don't even own stamps. Like, to this day, I don't mail things out. It's all email, text, and all that stuff. But because of this digital age, like me, I get, because I own properties, like I get spam texts. So annoying. It's like, oh, hey, it's like super generic. I want to buy your property. Text me. And then the reason why they have to be generic is because it's actually technically illegal to like cold text somebody without getting permission to text them. So that's why they have to be very vague and generic. But half the time, if you own an Android or Samsung, it's flagged as spam. So you don't even see it, right? Unless I click to the spam folder. That's why I don't like cold texting, right? And cold calling, same thing, right? Like, sometimes it might be spam, or I don't really pick up, and it's just obnoxious, right? Like, I hate spam phone calls. You get them all the time, right? So because of that, I think letters is very effective because it feels very personalized, and like you said, and I'm trying to target the mom and pop owners who are like in the upper 60s looking to retire. That's who I'm targeting. So they owned it, self managed it, and that's the demographic I'm trying to do. So, I did that for 6 months. And out of that, so I did 300 letters a month for 6 months. That's 1,800 letters. And I basically closed on two apartment complexes. Right. And I honestly had an opportunity to, again, office building, because the data is not sometimes not fully, it's a mixed bag of the data from PropStream. You might get some retail strip centers, some triplexes, fourplexes, duplexes, industrial. So that's just the nature of how they code it in PropStream. But I had a lot of opportunities. But I would say out of the 1,800, yeah, I got, or I got 180 responses. And out of the 180 responses, I was able to close on two apartment complexes and made $300,000 equity day one with those two. Right. So I spent 3,000 on mailers and I made $300,000 equity day one. So that's 100x return on my investment. Right. So I might be an outlier a little bit, but um, basically, to me, would you spend $300,000 to make $300,000, or $3,000 to make $300,000? I think everyone will take that bet, right? And that's not including the forced depreciation. So as I went over earlier, I got my 26 unit for $500,000. I'm gonna put in about 200, 300,000 renovation, all in for 800. It's gonna be worth about 1.5 million. Do a cash out refi. I'll get all my down payment back and all my renovation costs and probably more money on top of that. For my 20 unit, same thing. I got it for 350. Put in $100,000 of renovation, all in 450. It's probably gonna be worth 800,000 when I'm done with it. Cash out refi, pull all my down payment and my renovation costs, and maybe a little money. And then from there, I repeat my process, right? I go buy more apartments using my same model. So, that's basically what I did. And because people were like writing off, like I talked, if you check out my, Instagram, I got invited to like two podcasts to talk about my direct mailing strategy. And then I'm actually on a podcast tomorrow talk about my direct mailing strategy, and they're just like really surprised by the results that I was able to pull. And it's just kind of a strategy that I've honed like over time, and really studied it. So yeah, that's kind of how I did it. And like I said, the key is being consistent. And even like to this day, like I sent out a bunch of these letters like a year and a half ago. So I'll still get calls sometimes to this day, because they would throw my letter into a cupboard somewhere, and when they're cleaning out their cupboard, they find my letter and be like, oh. So basically, when you do letters, it's right time, right place. So what I teach my students, and what, or if I do your mailing campaign for you, the expectations I make clear is like, so typically if I send out 300 letters, about 1 to 3% response rate. 10% of the letters will have invalid addresses. That's just the nature of the business, right? Maybe the data is not perfect. So if you said 300, about 30 letters will come back to you, because that's just the data. And you get about 1 to 3% response rate. And you have to do this at least for 6 to 12 months to have any success. Like I think I was a little bit faster than usual, because I was targeting, Oklahoma's a more traditional, they appreciate letters there, right? Versus maybe in California, they may not. And then on top of that, it's so that's basically what I teach. And on top of that, you have to hit each owner at least 7 times to be the most effective. So if I have a list of 1,000 owners in Oklahoma City, I'm gonna send out 300 a month. So it's gonna take me about 3 to 4 months to hit all my owners. And once I hit that whole list, you want to repeat and hit that list again. You need to do it at least 7 times. 7 times. Just like you have to, because you want to be constant on their mind. And when you send mailers, you're not buying real estate, you're buying situations. So what do I mean by that? So when I sent my first mailer out, right, by the time I send my 7th mailer to you, that's going to be what, 21 months? Maybe the first time you got my letter, you were not motivated to sell, but in 21 months later, maybe something happened. Maybe there was a death in the family. Maybe there's disability. Maybe there's disagreement, right? Maybe there's a divorce. Those are 4 factors that can happen, and that's going to make them very motivated to sell. Because when you're dealing with any of those 4, the last thing you want to worry about is your piece of property, right? That's causing you stress. So that's why you have to constantly be sending out letters to have the best effect. So, that's basically, why I preach letters. And, just share what I've done, right? Like, this is exactly what I've done. This is how I got 46 units. And, this is what I'm doing teaching my students, and this is what I'm doing for clients, right? So I literally done it, and I'm doing it and teaching it. So, it's not something that, um, I haven't done myself. So does that answer your question there? Great, great. Um, any other questions or anyone else? Oh yeah, so it just depends. So let's just say that, my list is 1,000, and let's just say every month I'm sending out 300 letters a month, right? So in about, let's call it 3 to 4 months, I exhausted my list, right? So I send 300 a month. So to hit my whole list, it's gonna take me 3 to 4 months. So after I finish that 3 to 4 month segment, I'm gonna repeat that list again and have to do that 7 times. So it's gonna take you, each segment is 3 to 4 months. So you times that by 7. So that's gonna be, was it 21 to 28 months to hit your whole list? And that's assuming you have only 1,000, right? A very targeted list. But if you're gonna do like Texas or California, your list might be like 5,000, right? So you're doing 300, but then you can increase the rates you do as well, right? So some people want to do more than 100 letters a month, right? Like some clients think, Steven, I want to do like 600 letters a month, right? It's just whatever that number is. But for me, I like to do 300 because it's enough to get a feel if they like your letter or not. And then from there, I'll tweak your letter and how I strategize call to actions accordingly. So how I did it the first round, I'm going to change it up a little bit the second round, in the third round, in the fourth round, the fifth round, the sixth round, right? And depending on your marketing budget, I do very targeted marketing as well, where it's like first class mail. That classified mail that you get, and it throws you off. Like, who sent me that first class mail? It costs like $7, $8, right? So, but then they're going to open it, right? But if I spend $8, but I can make close on an apartment complex, I'll make more than that. So it really depends on your strategy. But for like, kind of your do it yourselfer, like, someone just doing it themselves, like, me, like I'm working full time and I was doing these letters. So 300 was just my sweet spot that I thought was the most effective. My list is very targeted because I have very strict criteria because I'm targeting a specific type of owner and the ones that own it for a long time. All right. So that's who I'm trying to target. So that's why my data is pretty small, relatively speaking. So I'd rather just hit it and hit it consistently. And what I like about the letters is that, like, I hate cold calling, cold texting people. It's like so much work, and like they cuss you out. Like if you cold call people, you've seen a guy knock on your door. Like if you knock on the door, they cuss you out or scream at you. I don't want to do that. Like with my letters, they call me, right? They'll call me, text me, email me. And if they're doing that, they're not going to cuss me out, right? Because they reach out to me. So it's like, to me, it's the best leverage of my time. That out of the 300, 10 will come out to me. And out of the 10, maybe one or two might be serious, right? That's just the nature of the beast. But then for me, what I teach my students is like, just make an offer that makes sense for you. And if they say no, just be like, or typically I teach my students like, oh, we ask, what's a good price for you? Right? I always ask first, right? Well, 90% of the time, they're going to say, you give me a price. Right? That's just the nature. They don't want to anchor, right? So I basically went over the 3 offer method that earlier. Tax test price is always the cheapest, and whenever I offer that, I expect them to get offended because they're like, "What? That's so cheap! Like, how'd you come with that price?" Like, "Oh, that's a tax test price. It's public information, and they know because they get the text bill every year. They know how much it is on there." So that's kind of how I do it, and um, for just some numbers, I think one of my students sent out a bunch of letters to, I think he sent out his first batch in downtown San Antonio. And he attracted an owner for a 20, was I think 11 units in downtown San Antonio, which is a very popping area. A hot market, right? That's a hot market. and the owner owned it for over 100 years. She's the third generation, and she wants to sell it. So I'm basically trying to coach him to kind of pitch seller creative financing, so seller carry first, so she becomes a bank. But he's trying to do that over text. I'm like, no, you got to talk to her. You can't do that over text, right? You have to build trust. And what I teach in my courses, you never come out the gate with seller financing because they don't. No one understands what seller financing is. You have to build the trust first, run it through conventional lenders first, and get it rejected because you already know like it's gonna get rejected based on the property and the income. And at that point, you offer a solution of seller credit financing where they become the bank and they get income, and I get the property without involving a bank, right? So it's like a long process, but basically that's like the whole gem of my course. Basically, direct mail to get off market leads under market value and more opportunity for creative financing. And then I teach my students all the creative financing strategies. But most importantly, it's to how to talk and negotiate with owners and build that trust and help them understand creative financing. That's like the true money, to be honest, of the course. If you were to take two things away from my course, um, so yeah, so basically he got I think it was 11 units, and they want around 750K, and it's all paid off. And I just said, man, that's a screaming deal. Like you're probably gonna have to renovate it for maybe $10,000-15,000 a unit, but with that location in downtown San Antonio, that is prime real estate. Like you cannot do better than that. So I'm coaching him to basically build trust with the owner. So that was just his first letter batch. I think he said he got like maybe about 3% actually. So I think right now it's a lot more effective with mailers because people are afraid that home prices are going to go down. The recession and all that stuff. People are fearful. So because of that, sellers are a lot more motivated to talk to you. So that's just kind of my pitch, is that like direct mail and creative financing is going to be a lot more successful during the bad times. So I'm kind of sad that I can't buy more real estate because all my capital is tied up in my mobile home park and all that. So yeah, yeah. Does that answer your question, Stacy? Yeah, yeah. No, great question. So yeah, I basically did the direct mailing service for busy professionals because like basically when I created my course, I want all my students to be successful, right? Like that's the whole intent of the course. And if a student is successful, what are they going to do? They're going to talk about the course and advertise it to their friends and family, right? So basically, for me, I want to create a very good product, right? That actually works. And what I've done and what I've kind of come to realize was a lot of barrier for the initial students was like they just couldn't send their letters consistently, which was leading to failure, right? Because if you don't send your letters, you're not going to get deals. And how are you going to get a deal, right? So, some students just buy the course because they just want to learn, right? Nothing wrong with that. Like you just want to learn, you can use that, you can vet a syndicator. Perfect, right? That's fine. But for students who want to do what I'm doing and get deals, they have to send their letters out. So um, basically, if you look at my course website, there's three plans. There's a bronze, silver, and a gold. And basically, the bronze is just the course, and then the silver is I'll do your 300 mailers a month for 6 months, and gold is basically 300 mailers a month for 12 months. So basically, from there, from if whatever course they buy, um, basically my clients yeah, I can send you the course after. But basically, what I do is I'll say, okay, tell me your market, Stacy. You want to do Oklahoma? Let's say you want to do Texas. Okay, specifically in Texas. So what counties specifically, right? And let's just say you want to do San Antonio, whatever county that is in. And basically, I would find all the neighboring counties around San Antonio, and then basically pull a list through PropStream, and it'll tell me how many leads you have. So I basically do my criteria that I use for my Oklahoma City properties for Texas. I'll create that prop stream list, and from there, basically, I what I do for all my clients is I think the second Monday of every month, that's when the mailers come out. And then so I send a calendar invite reminder on everyone's calendar. Okay, the letters are coming out the second Monday of every month. And by the second Friday of every month, that's when you should hear your responses. So you have a reminder to know when to expect calls, right? So it's a reminder for my clients that the letter's coming out and to expect phone calls. And then from there, basically, um, in terms of everything else, like you said, I pull the data and then I basically send it over to Yell Letters Complete and then tell them how to strategize the letter, right? And then with the personalized paragraph, typically, obviously when you buy the course, I want to know about you. So if you have kids, what your job is, your family, and whatnot, I basically would ask the key points I want to include in your letter and then start basically sending your mailers out. And then the intent is when the mails go out, they're going to start calling you. So I just tell my clients, hey, like I'm going to do it for you and expect to hear calls the second Friday of every month, whether it's text, phone call, or email. Expect that. And you want to respond in at least 24 hours. At least acknowledge them when they reach out to you to say, hey, thanks for calling me. Just acknowledge it and then set up a time to talk to them in person. And then from there, my course has like a kind of it's like 10 questions about what to ask the owner that I've honed after talking to like hundreds of owners, that the best questions to break ice, build trust, and to get the information that you need to strategize creative financing. So that's the strategy. So basically, we do that every month, and then with the clients, obviously, I have them report to me their response rate, so I can track the data, right? So I can track to say, okay, Stacy, we'll send out 300 letters. How many people called you? Whatever, 10, right? So basically, now I track the data, and then if I don't hit the certain response rate that I expect, 1 to 3%, then I slightly make tweaks to the next batch of letters that I send the next month. So that's basically what it is that I do. And then I just found that like just offering that to busy professionals, it would guarantee that they would get 6 to 12 months of letters out, and it would really increase your chance of getting like, your first off-market apartment complex. So that's just kind of it at a high level. Basically, I just do all the back work behind the scenes, and the letter is basically everything's handwritten by the company that I use. And then from there, they just kind of sign your name in cursive, so it's like pretty generic. But the key is not your actual signature. The key is the fact that they're getting the perception that it's hand signed by you, and it feels a lot more personalized, which increases your call rate. That's all it really is um, for the letters. So does that answer your question there, Stacy? Kind of a picture. So, like I said, it's not hard to do yourself, but the problem I'm finding is that like my students will do it for like 2 months and they stop, and they're like, Steven, it doesn't work. I'm like, yeah, because you didn't do it for at least 6 to 12 months, right? Like when I first started, the first 2 months, I heard no response, but then like towards the end, that's when it starts to compound your letters. So it's something that you have to consistently do. So I just said, you know what? I offer the service out of necessity to ensure my students are successful. And it caters towards a lot of working professionals because a lot of my students, I'll be honest, they're probably between like 35 to 45, have kids, they have aging parents that they take care of. They're just split so many different ways and they cannot reliably send their mailers out every month. So I do it for them, right? It's just kind of like Uber Eats, right? Like you can go and buy your food, but you're just going to pay for the convenience. So basically, you're paying for the convenience, and I don't mind doing it because I want to make sure my students are successful, right? Like I want to like confidently say that everyone who buys my gold plan, this is the percentage that actually get their first apartment complex in this time frame. Like I want to present that data, right? Once I build up that base, and then once I have that data, it speaks for itself. I don't even need to sell my course. I'm a terrible salesperson, but I'm very good at tweaking the course, right? So like a lot of my students, they go through the course like, hey, Steven, I have a question about this. What do? I make another lecture addressing that question so that I'm constantly adding modules to the course, right? Because like I said, I want to create like a one-stop encyclopedia for all my students to succeed. So basically, that's what it is. And that's what I learned, that like I have to do the service to be successful. And it caters towards, high income W-2 workers, right? I'll be honest, that's most of my students are high income W-2 and they're very busy, right? And they're just pulled with so many different obligations, they can't do it. So I do it for them. So, um, but yeah, I can send you the link to that, and I offer affiliates as well to my students, where they can earn some commission if they refer friends and family or whatnot. So um, um, yeah, so that's my shameless plug for that. I have time for one more question before I get kicked off at 8. Any last questions? Yeah. So for me, I kind of have a slightly different philosophy. So I like Oklahoma because it's a steady eddy market. There's no highs, there's no lows, right? So when the market goes up, Oklahoma kind of is like the same. When the market goes down, Oklahoma is the same. So it's a very steady eddy market versus like California. The prices just surged and now they're kind of going down, but it's still kind of high. So I personally like. So what I kind of teach in my course is the markets I like is, well, number one, like typically the Sun Belt. So if you draw a smiley face on the U.S. map, I prefer warmer climates because I don't want to deal with snow and like burst pipes. Number two is low taxes, low state taxes, low state property tax to be specific. So that's typically, like Oklahoma is pretty low, like Alabama, Arkansas, kind of like that southeast area. And then next one is like kind of like good population growth. So I want about 10% population growth over the past 10 years. So there's a great site that I show in my course, but city-data.com. If you use that website, you punch in the county or city that you want to invest in. It'll actually tell you like how much the population grew over the past couple months, or you just can Google it, like what's the population of Oklahoma City, and they show like a graph, right? So you just do the math, like did it grow 10%? So that's why I kind of like. And then landlord friendly for obvious reasons, right? Like in California, it's impossible to evict. In Oklahoma, a 15-day notice and I can evict someone. 15 days. I just give them a notice. You have 7 days to fix this. If you don't fix it in 7 days, then you have another 8 days to get your stuff out and leave. And all of them do leave. The moment I put a notice on, they leave immediately. They don't squat, right? And then, more importantly, where you have a property manager, like I said, your property manager makes or breaks your team. So if you have a good property manager in Omaha, Nebraska, then go invest in Omaha, Nebraska, right? That's where you have your unfair advantage, right? I have an unfair advantage in Oklahoma City. That's why I invest there. That's very simple. But in terms of real estate, I don't really pay attention to the news. Like, regardless if it's up, down, left, right, I'm constantly buying real estate, right? Like, people tell me, like, yeah, low interest rate now. Would you cash out refi? Yes, I would. Because you're married to the purchase price, but you date the interest rate. So, what does that mean? If I pay 8% interest, if I cash out refi my loan from 4% to 8%, yeah, it's going to suck for a little bit. But if interest rate's lower in a couple of years, I'll just refinance again, right? For me, it's about increasing my velocity of money. Take out my money and buy another one. But then once you hit a certain point, which I'm learning, is that like, okay, whatever. Let's say I own enough real estate that nets me 20K a month. At that point, like you may not need to scale anymore. You just can like focus on paying down your properties if you want, right? Um, at that point, once you paid off all your properties, you net 20K a month. You can do nothing. You can retire, or you can continue to buy more real estate. It's really up to you. It's options. So that's kind of what I do. And then right now, like I mentioned earlier, like given all this uncertainty, owners are a lot more motivated now to sell. The owners before, like when I was sending out mailers, they were like, "Oh, well, pay me $2.5 million for this property. I literally underwrite it with bank underwriting. It's worth 1.5." They want $1 million more than what I was willing to pay, and I just said, "Well, I'll give you 2.5 million, but you better sell or finance this deal. 0% down, 0% interest, divide it over 30 years. I'll give you that price." That's why I teach my students, your price, my terms, right? And they're saying, well, why don't you give any interest? Because I'm overpaying by $1 million. That's your interest up front or over 30 years, right? So that's how I do it. And then they're a lot more willing because like people are fear based, right? So before it was a seller's market. So they say, okay, well, if you say no, I have 20 other investors who will say yes. So I didn't have much power. But now that it's shifting towards a buyer's market, but sellers still want seller market pricing, because I know that, I can give them their price, but they better do creative financing for me. So it's a win win, right? So this is actually the best time, in my opinion, to start sending out letters and to get another deal. Like I would be doing it myself, but then like I said, so all my capital is tied on three heavy value add deals. But once they finish up, I'm hoping in 6 months, then I'm gonna start sending out letters again and trying to get more deals. Once my apartments have bird. So for me, I call it dollar cost averaging real estate, right? So you kind of buy it, but like I said, the way I buy real estate, I go direct to seller, so it doesn't even matter to me like whether what it is because I'm buying it right and I'm buying it equity day one. So um, that's kind of the system that I'm teaching and that I've done. So yeah, does that kind of answer your question there? Cool, cool. Well, cool. If no, I guess they gave me 5 more minutes. So I actually have one more question. Google's keeping me on. So I have one more question. But if not, then yeah, one time for one last question from Stacy or Chang. You got one last question then? All right. If no other questions, then thanks for hopping on. And Stacy, I'll send you a link to the course and all. And if not, this, like I said, this will be recorded onto YouTube, and hope to see you guys next week.